Hello, everybody. I am Abby Lemon Stevens, and I've got my co-host Katie Smith Green with me. We're at the Nashville Hospitality Pop-Up. We are so excited to be represented today with our friend Marten Haring, CEO of Lirio. He's joining us. We're going to learn a little bit about what Lirio is up to in 2026, talk a little bit of contrarian predictions for the year, and some global health innovators. So, Marten, thank you so much for joining us.
It's great to be with you guys. Ladies.
For those who might be new here, what does Lirio do?
We are a patient engagement platform that is using machine learning and behavioral science to get to the N of one personalization. How do we understand what motivates people? What gets in the way of them making better choices for their health, and try to empower them to overcome those barriers?
No big deal.
No big deal at all.
That's awesome.
Amazing. Okay, so Marten, I know you've been involved in some of the Global Health Innovators trips to Leeds and London. I think you may be going on some upcoming trips as well. Tell us a little bit about that experience. Rumor has it. Yeah. Don't let anybody know I spilled the tea. But tell us a little bit about your experience with Global Health Innovators. What have you uncovered? How has it made Lirio a better business?
So I think, I tend to wear a couple of hats when we go on these trips. One is try to be an evangelist for Nashville. We think this is a fantastic place to build a business, to live, work, and play, and we want to evangelize that around the world, so that if people have a choice of where they, come and build their U.S. presence, that they come to Nashville. So I have that hat on, but as a startup and a CEO, I use the opportunity to be out in these different countries and markets to understand the dynamics of what do I need to know about those markets in order to do business. What can I learn from other startup leaders that obviously are in their backyard, whether it's Leeds or London? What can they tell me about what's hard for them, lessons they've learned? So it's a great two-way exchange. I think there is just so much to share as a startup leader about the things that you learn the hard way. And in the UK in particular, where we were in our last trip, the big sort of client, if you wish, is the NHS. And there really isn't an equivalent of an NHS organization in the US. So just, through conversations, learning more about how do you do business with the NHS? What are some of the things that can accelerate pilots if that's what's required? And then, of course, startup CEOs there are really eager to penetrate the U.S. market, which for them is a big deal.
Equally as mysterious.
And so I try humbly to share what we have learned, from being a startup here. But yeah, I love the networking, the ability to hone your go-to-market strategy, and then ultimately also find business partners, right? Whether it's legal firms that can advise you, or even people that can open doors and introduce you to prospective clients. So for us, it's been fantastic, and I hope I get to join these trips for a long time to come.
Well, again, rumor has it you're in.
Going to Ireland, Northern Ireland.
That's right.
I'm a little sad I missed Lori's trip to Japan, but it's coming. Hopefully,
you can
2.0.
always petition for a trip back, right?
Yeah.
So speaking of that, though, tell us a little bit. When did you come to Nashville? Tell us about your decision process to be here.
So before Lirio, I came to Nashville in 2013 for a different startup. It was also an AI company. Was really focused on multiple verticals, multiple industries. Started in the intelligence community. Went into financial services, and ultimately partnered with HCA to get into healthcare. With Lirio, my current startup, we're focused on healthcare and life sciences. That's all we do. And so, it's been 12 years in Nashville, but, about 5 years at Lirio.
I'm curious, you've mentioned giving advice on these trips to the startup founders that you're meeting with in other places. Where do you think that international founders most underestimate the difficulty of setting up shop as a U.S. commercial operation? And then how can cities like Nashville help to reduce that friction and really roll out the welcome mat?
I think Nashville is a microcosm of healthcare in the US. And I think if you want to learn about the market, you want to get introduced to players, the concentration, the experience, the knowledge that we have in Nashville is just a fantastic place to start and to base your expansion into the rest of the US. I think if you don't do that, you have to do more on your own. It's just the concentration. You go to New York for financial services, maybe for marketing firms. You go to Silicon Valley for tech firms. Nashville is a fantastic place to come if you want to educate yourself and get smart about how to do business in healthcare. So I think, if you're coming from a system like the UK healthcare system that is, really built around the National Health Service, you have a lot to learn about the US market. And so, coming here it's really a great investment, time well spent.
What is your pitch for fellow Nashville-based CEOs on potentially getting involved in some of the events or the operations or the programs that are starting to spin up for this kind of Nashville as healthcare hospitality destination?
Paid forward. You're obviously got a lot to do with your own startup, a lot of things to figure out, but healthcare is complex. As a CEO, that things are hard. They can be lonely. There's no one else but yourself to look in the mirror and hold accountable. So having others to go to and learn is just a privilege, right? And so I think the networking aspect, giving up some of your time to help mentor, advise others, and you will get plenty in return. Maybe not, today, maybe not tomorrow, but there's just a lot that each company, each CEO needs to learn. And giving means at some point you will receive back, I'm sure.
Well, it's funny. We were talking with Chase Spurlock earlier and referenced specifically how Nashville is unique in that regard. And part of this hospitality that we have, native Nashvilleian Chases too, I feel really protective of that identity. And so I always appreciate that perspective of, understanding we have to continue that. That's part of what makes Nashville a desirable location for people to come. So couldn't agree more.
It's a fantastic city. And, if you look at the license plates around, there are a lot of people that are starting to discover this place. So it's no longer a well-kept secret.
We've had a few newcomers lately.
Just a few. That's right. That's right.
It's interesting when the import from Canada in 2013 feels like a native 12 years later.
That's right.
Yeah.
I mean, you lived through the formative
A lot has happened.
Thank you.
For sure.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll accept you. Okay, well, let's get to your contrarian prediction. I know you were mulling this one over. What are your thoughts for 2026?
I have been spending a little bit of time thinking about some of the risks around AI, and maybe not what people typically think about in healthcare. We're doing a lot of work around AI governance, thinking through how we mitigate risks, as developers for software, really with the patient in mind and the client in mind. One area that is sort of nagging at me that has sort of become a point of interest in the last couple of months is as we rely more on using AI tools as a company, forget the products that we deliver to the market, but as we think about our own supply chain, our own internal development processes, we're starting to think about how do we leverage generative AI tools, large language models, to basically build our software. I think there is a little bit of a reckoning ahead of us in terms of understanding all of the different code repositories that have been exploited by some of these large language models as they're trying to learn the art of programming, right? A lot of these open source repositories in particular were built with the idea that, people could look at the code, they could use the code under a particular license. And of course, when I build software with some of these newer large language tools, think type coding tools, et cetera, I often don't know what went into building those tools and what kind of license restrictions, are potentially coming back to haunt me when I have my app that was built using these tools in production. So I think the whole ecosystem of thinking about, copyright, thinking about what licenses may apply as I build new software on tools that I may not fully understand what's gone into them, and how do we deal with things like liability and indemnification. These are all areas I think that will come up sooner rather than later, because we do live in an interesting litigious society, and I think we're just a couple of lawsuits away from really understanding what some of the new frameworks for how to interpret these realities, how they will come back to potentially cause some problems. Right now, everybody's very optimistic. It's all about creativity. I think at some point, we're going to discover some of the limitations of these newer tools. And
how can leaders conduct that due diligence, or what might mitigation of that risk look like?
I think as a general approach, there are risk management frameworks in every organization. Right? We already have that in place today in healthcare. The most well-known one is all the work we're doing around data privacy, data security, thinking about high trust accreditations and things of that nature. You look at how do you use some of these risk management frameworks to start exploring some of these newer unknowns. Right? You have people potentially within your organization, whether they have a legal background or some operational background, and they will do a fantastic job when given a task to go and chase down information and explore new areas. And I think this is the time, if you're not already doing that and you are a software development shop, make sure that the people responsible for risk management really start thinking about, what are some of the risks related to using some of these newer tools that are essentially writing code instead of humans.
There's a lot riding on that code that it's writing.
There's a lot riding on that code, and it's interesting, right? Because you're accelerating time to market and innovation because you're abstracting the tools that people use. They don't need the same level of skills that you used to when you wrote software, 3, 4, 5 years ago, and there is a huge benefit in that. I think we're also making it harder to understand the ramifications of people not fully understanding those tools. And we haven't really tested that, that situation. And I think that will be put to the test because there will be instances where bad things happen.
Yeah.
And usually when bad things happen, you start to unravel all of the things that are unknown. You get some new rulings, and at that point, people will go, okay, now we know. But there is things you can do already today to, make sure that when you select certain tools, you have already done your homework and that you give some guidance to your own teams as they go about exploring some of these tools.
Yeah.
So.
It reminds me, Katie and I both are in the marketing space. It reminds me of, the Adobe license to capture your photos, right? You can't just go rip an image off of Google and put it on a flyer and call yourself done, right? You've got to really vet and make sure you can own the content. So it's kind of fascinating to me. This is a much larger scale and probably a lot harder to track down than an image, right? That belongs to somebody, but really interesting thoughts.
Well, yeah, I feel like as teams and especially dev teams become increasingly reliant on these tools, making sure the systems and the processes are in place to have that interaction be one of engagement and not outsourcing, so that you can protect against some of the skill erosion and the memory erosion that happens when you start just kind of letting it do the whole task and not pushing back, not interrogating it, not making sure you're reviewing everything that's coming out of it. But,
well said. Yeah, I think, the good news is it's not like you have to hire different people to figure this out. I think it's an issue that needs to be explored by people who already understand, what to look for and how to turn that into advice and guidelines for the company. But yeah, if you're not doing it today, you should absolutely start doing it tomorrow.
There's the take. All right, Marten. Well, thank you so much. It's been so fun to have you here. We promised you at least a good time. So
listen,
I hope we've
is it
delivered.
over?
Right. Unfortunately, we are out of time, but thank you so much for joining us again, Marten, Haring, Lirio. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks.